I've mounted the door up on here now again, and I've got this weather stripping, this welting put in here all the way around where the door goes, except down here on the bottom. I've got this Naugahyde, this vinyl fabric that was left over from doing the seats that I'm going to use to make a seal to go across here on the bottom to finish this bottom out. But first I was checking this door out. This pin right here is the door latch. This tube comes out here, it is extended out, and it's got a plug welded into the end of it, and then a tab here for a stop for the door. And this plug, this tube, gets drilled out, a hole for that pin to fit in. Well, that stop keeps the door from closing all the way, and keeps it, this pin won't go in there far enough to drill a hole in there for that pin to go into for stopping the door. So we got to do something about that. I put a little bit of masking tape on the end of that to try to help keep it from scratching things up too bad, but we'll do just a little adjustment here, a little gentle persuasion. Let's see how that does. That's better. Still not good enough. I don't know whether I'm going to get it in there or not. That tab is welded, instead of being welded onto the back side of this tube, that tab is kind of welded halfway out there. Even though the tab is bending out, the root of the tab is still in there too close to that. The back one here, this tab is welded more closely to the outside edge of that tube, and I was able to get it over a little bit, and I can get just a little bit more here. And that gets it in there a lot better. That gets that door almost closed flush. I don't know what I'm going to do on this front one. That's just messed up from the factory. They just didn't get that on in the right spot. They got it too far. It's not quite halfway out this tube. It's but it won't let me move it in far enough to get. And we'll see if we can adjust it. See what I can do here. I got the back one pretty close, but this front one is just not going. The door is just too close to this pin to be affected by bending this tab out anymore, because the attach point for the tab is not bending, and for the door stop there, that's not bending or moving any, and that's attached right to this tube right here. It's welded right in, and that's where this door is contacting there in the front. So I'm not going to be able to get any more on that. I've got just barely enough there. I think if I drill a hole, it's going to go right down the outside edge of this tube, and that's just another one of them things that the quality control is not as good as it should have been on this thing, I guess. On that's just not a very good thing from the factory there. They should have had that welded back farther from that edge so that this door would close all the way. But it'll be able to latch. I'll be able to get that hole in there, and looking down at that pin, it's just inside of that tube, just far enough where where that hole is drilled, it's going to go in and latch. The back one is a little better. It's still not perfect. It's still not right, but it's better. It goes farther in there, contacts more towards the center of this plate on this tube. But this front one is way off, and nothing I can do about it without cutting that tang on and welding on a new one, and then it screws up the fabric job and the paint job and everything else. So it is what it is, I guess. I took my gold Sharpie and put a good coat of Sharpie ink on this post here, on this tube here where that latch goes for the door, and then did it on both the front and the back, and then pulled the door up there and let the handle close and rocked it back and forth real good. I've got a nice scratch mark in there, and that tells me where the end of that scratch mark is right where the point goes on that pin on that door latch. So I can drill this hole out now. Now that door latch pin is tapered on the end, it's pointed on the end. So when I made that scratch mark in there, the inside of the scratch mark would have been the center of the line where that pin goes. Well, I took a center punch and marked that on the inside of where the scratch mark was on that, and then I drilled it out with a number 40 drill bit, and then I think a number 27 drill bit. That pin, I took the calipers and measured that, and it measures out just over 1/4 of an inch. I think it's supposed to be a 1/4 inch pin, but it measures out just a little bit over 1/4 inch. So I've got a number F drill bit, and I'll drill those holes out with that F drill bit and see how that works. And if it doesn't go freely into the hole with that, then I can always take a reamer and ream the hole out a little bit. I'm also going to take a countersink and chamfer that hole a little bit so it's tapered going in and make it a little easier for those pins to go in there to get started in that. I'll give this a try. Okay, that latches. The pin doesn't go all the way in the front one here. Okay, so I get some reamers and ream those holes out a little bit bigger. This rear one's going to go in just fine. Problem is in this front one, it's just too close to this edge right here. Well, in that case, I tried to lead that reamer a little bit towards the outside of this hole on this front one, but it just wasn't working. And now I was going to try to chainsaw file in there, but it won't go in. There's a stop in there behind that post, and I can't use the file on that. I got this little needle file. I'll see if I can use it. Well, it's still kind of tight, but I got it now, so it'll go through. I bored out both the front and the back holes, oversized with the reamers, but this front one, I wasn't getting it over, and just like I thought, this tab here is welded too far over on this tube, and it won't let that door go all the way in there. So that catch was out towards the outer side of it. But when I drilled that hole in there for the pin to go in, I put it right on center of where the point on that pin was. It wouldn't go through. But when I reamed the hole out, there's it running right into this tube, and this weld right here, the metal on this weld was harder than the tube, and it kept pushing both the drill bit and the reamer in instead of coming out. Even though I tried to push it this way, I tried to crowd it to the outside here. When I got to using this little file, I couldn't use a round chainsaw file because there's a stop right back in there, just a little ways farther, not far enough in to get into the teeth on the chainsaw file. So I used this little needle file in there, and I could feel that weld, and even with by hand filing it, I was going over that weld and filing more around either side of it than I was the weld. But I finally got it, and we're right out into the edge of that tube right there. That pin is sliding right along the edge of that tube. So I finally got it so it would close. And to make sure of what was going on, I took and cleaned off these pins with some acetone, and then swabbed them down with Sharpie, with the gold Sharpie, and then put them in the, and close the door and open and close that pin a few times until I got a pattern. And you can got a wear pattern right here on that Sharpie mark. That's right where the weld through is on that, right where it was catching. So I've just about got it. I've got it smoothed out pretty good, and it's closing now. It still has to, the pin won't go in by itself with the spring power on the door latch. You have to pull it closed, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But if I keep working on that and get that weld filed down a little bit more, you can get that smoothed out in there. Maybe I can get that to work so it works smooth. But It's working smoother now, but I still have to pull it closed to physically pull the handle closed. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It keeps it from rattling, at least until the pin wears out like it did on the other airframe. Well, that's going to work okay, I think. I got that smoothed out pretty good. It still takes a little bit of pressure by hand to get it to close all the way. I put a little bit of lithium grease on there to lube that up and make it slide a little easier, and that works a little better now. I'll put some molybdenum disulfate on there when we get ready to finish it up. I've got some dry moly lube that I put on there that will coat everything, and then it stays dry and doesn't collect dust or water or anything, and it works as a pretty good lube. So, I cut this Naugahyde, this vinyl fabric, to width, to the final width. I measured it and cut it to rough width, and then I stuck it in here and measured it and cut the final width. And then I cut a preliminary length on it. I kind of tried to bends on it and figured out how long I wanted it down to slide down in on the inside of this. And anyway, I cut it off so that it was plenty long. And I figured out how far down in there I wanted it, and then I figured out where I wanted to bend in this for it to fold over, because it's going to glue onto this, or attach onto this door frame someplace there, and then it's going to want to bend over so that it seals in that lower section of the door. And I ironed that in, and then of course when I put it on, none of the measurements come out exactly the way they intended, and then fitted this down in there, stuffed that down in there, and put all my screws in for that lower Kydex panel, for that lower side panel, that holds that vinyl in there. And I took some contact cement and sprayed on this lower door frame and on this fabric here. And of course my line that I had in there is not quite right, but anyway, it's close. So I've got that glued down there now temporarily, or more than temporarily, but I've got that glued down. So I can close the door on that and wait till that seals up, and because I'm going to take the door off to do any more work on the airplane. I don't need to have the door on here getting scuffed up and banged up and stuff. But I wanted to get this seal here fitted on there. So I've got that fitted on there now, and I'll go ahead and close this door on it and kind of let it take a set there where I want it. And then after it's all set up, we'll take that door off of there